Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic: what family secret was finally spilled in your family? Found out my uncle is actually my brother. My mom had him when she was so young that my grandparents raised him. How old were you when you found out? I was a teenager, 15 I think. It was quite shocking. How old was your brother when he was your uncle? We aren't close, so I don't know for sure, but he's at least 10 years older than me. It didn't seem weird because my mom is the oldest of her 9 siblings. My mother is 17 years younger than the youngest of her 3 siblings and born about a year after that sibling started dating her husband. I am still waiting for this secret to come out. I have asked about it and my mother doesn't think so, but I still think there's an even chance. Could also not be the case. I am the youngest by 17 as well, and while most people thought I was my brother's child, there are pictures of my mom pregnant with me. My sister cheated on her husband throughout her entire marriage to the point that all 3 of her kids have different biological fathers. That's like the reverse of Mamma Mia. Papa someone else, eh? That's close to mine. Sister cheated on hers for 10 YRS. The guy she finally left her husband for was a par involved with theft/sale of prescription meds and ended up being the killer in a murder-suicide 2 YRS later with his co-conspirator. Each sentence was wilder than the next. When my mother fell ill and I took over her finances, I found thousands of pounds of gambling debt on her credit cards. Then I found adoption papers for a child she'd had before me that she'd never mentioned. Then another family member told me my dad didn't die in a car crash but committed suicide in prison. Damn, that's a lot. I hope you're doing well. Thank you, I'm doing fine. My mother died from her illness and I found the adoption papers the day before the funeral and I got told about my dad on the day of the funeral. Before that I thought we were really normal, very boring people. My grandma didn't drive. I thought she couldn't, but it was just never discussed. One day when I was maybe 7 to 8, I'd been trying to get anyone to drive me to the store for candy. We were visiting my aunt and uncle. Grandma lived with them. They had Bitto honey at the local store, which I could no longer get at home. But no one would take me to the store. Finally I said I'd just ask Grandma, and my cousin chimes in with, "Grandma can't drive." "Oh, you bet your sweet ass I can drive. They just don't let me." Grandma had overheard and she was in high dudgeon. But that's all that was said about it, and my aunt finally took me to the store, so I forgot about it. Years later, when I'd just gotten my license, I asked my mom what was up with Grandma not driving. She explained that during Prohibition Grandma bootlegged alcohol for moonshiners. She was very successful at it. She was so successful at it that when the moonshiners were finally busted, even though the revenuers never caught my grandma, her license was suspended by the state to never be reissued. Later in life she was told she could petition for it back, but it came with an admission of guilt or some such. She told M to go to hell. I love this story so much. Your grandma was an old-timey badass. I knew an old man who, when he was a little kid, watched the bootleggers speed through their town as it was supposedly quite the exciting event for their small farming community. Little kids were probably watching your grandma race down the roads of their towns back in the day, too. She had a way about her. That's for damn sure. Cats hanging around your place and you can't get rid of them. Just rub their ass raw with a piece of corncob and splash turpentine on it. That'll get em gone. Note, do not actually do this. Cruelty to animals laws have come a long way since the 1930s. Can't get rid of ducks who are eating in your garden. You get a piece of salt pork a few inches long, and you real tight tie some fishing line to it. Dangle it out there to the ducks, but give yourself 5 feet of line per duck. That first one will eat it, and it'll go through their system in minutes. By the time the hour is up, you'll have 6 ducks on a string and you can lead those bastards to someone else's garden. But my favorite memory was her sitting on a rocker on the front porch, wrapped in a shawl, chewing tobacco, and spitting off the edge to the flower bed. My uncle comes pulling up, gets out of the car, and he's white as a ghost. Everyone asks what's wrong, and he starts explaining that just as he topped the hill coming out of town there were 2 semi-trucks coming right at him in both lanes. He did the only thing he could do, and he skirted the ditch on the shoulder but managed to keep the car from going down into the bar ditch. Barely survived. Grandma huffs and says, "That's the difference say to you and me. It a hit that suffabitch head on. Asterisk spit asterisk." My great-great-grandfather was exiled and banned from Missouri for being a sheep thief. I read an amusing anecdote here on Reddit a few days ago. In Europe, I want to say either Ireland or Wales, stealing a sheep was a capital crime, but shagging a sheep was just met with a lot of embarrassment. So if a sheep thief was caught out in the fields with no good explanation of what he was doing out there, it behoved him to pretend that he was a degenerate pervert rather than a thief. And that is why / how the stereotype and jokes about sex with sheep came about. The penalty for livestock theft was to have your hand removed. The penalty for bestiality was to have a finger removed. Sheep thieves would claim buggery to lose only a finger instead of the wrist. As a young teenager, my grandma shot her pedophile father in the back while he was sleeping. He had been molesting her and all her siblings. She ran away after being hidden by her brother for some time. Her father survived though. Thankfully my grandma never faced any legal consequences, but she was batshit crazy until the day she died. My aunt told me at her funeral because I asked why grandma was the way she was. One of my former employees told me the story of her wife shot and killed her dad when she was a teen. He had been molesting her and her sister, but judge and jury didn't see it as self-defense since he was sleeping when she shot him. She served time in prison for the murder, but got out and had her record expunged due to various circumstances including inadequate counsel from a public defender. Then she went to law school, graduated at the top of her class, and is now a lawyer in a large metro area and does a ton of pro bono work for kids in similar situations. Edit, a word. That's heartbreaking she had to go through that. Rule of double tap. Cowboys can't shoot slow. Or they'll end up below. When they need some help, they reach for the root beer shelf. Relative did not just fall off a bridge with her baby, she jumped. It seems obvious in hindsight but they reported it differently both in the news and to younger family members. Edit, wow, this blew up. I just want to say it's been weirdly really nice reading all of the comments here. I knew this was common in a hush-hush way but never the stories of other real people like this. I used to work in a field dealing with suicide prevention, and even though some may see the passing as a result of suicide, a lot of family members and loved ones have a very difficult time coping with the idea that the victim passed due to these circumstances, ESP when children are involved. This is not uncommon to report differently, as it is not something a lot families are able to come to terms with, and understandably. I am really sorry to hear about your relative, though, and I hope some of the wounds have somewhat healed over time. Edit, whoa. I did not expect so many people to respond with their personal stories and experiences. I am sorry I haven't gotten around to replying to everyone. Also thank you for the awards. Today has been a rough one, so to see so many people sharing, having legitimate, civil conversations and just overall the sheer amount to amazing people seriously brings happiness to my day, even if this is such a sad topic. I've heard that with autoerotic asphyxiation, the family is more likely to report it as suicide because the truth is too embarrassing. Interesting to see how people cope with death so differently. Several 9/11 deaths at the WTC were attributed to victims being blown out of windows by wind, or explosions. They didn't want to categorize them as suicides due to jumping out of a 100th floor window to escape a raging inferno. After my grandfather passed, we found out he had fathered a child when he was posted in Italy during World War II. He never knew. His mother intercepted any letters from the Italian girl. He came home, met and married my grandmother and had 4 children. I forget who in the family found out and how. It's crazy to think we have a whole Italian family out there. Edit, went to sleep and woke up to crazy notifications. Thanks for the awards. To clarify, I'm in the UK, not that it's relevant to the story. My oldest aunt is 77, so this kid would be at least 79 by now, I would think. We've considered doing the DNA testing, but some family members aren't comfortable with how those companies could use the information. It's a really sad story, but if his mother hadn't intercepted the letters, I wouldn't exist. It's a weird place to be in emotionally. Imagine that Italian girl sending letters and believing someday a reply will come. Thinking about it makes me sad. Imagine finding out that your American family exists through a post on Reddit. My aunt wasn't my grandfather's child. He met my granny when my aunt was a very sick infant. She had polio and wasn't expected to survive. My granddad married my granny so she could get on his insurance and move to an area that had proper medical support. My aunt was the first infant to survive open heart surgery at Yale New Haven Hospital, and although she had to be in leg braces most of her childhood, she had a great, although not long enough, life. My granddad loved her like she was his own, and I never knew until she went to her bio dad's funeral when I was a teenager. Editing to say, thank you to everyone who's shared their family stories or left a comment. I've spent the whole evening reminiscing and sharing stories I haven't really told in a long time, and that really means a lot. Thank you so much to everyone who's given an award, or left an upvote. I haven't been able to comment on everyone's stories, but I've read them all and deeply appreciate them. This has been the highlight of my week. That's honestly a really nice story. I needed this lovely story after all the other stories of cheating and heartbreak. What a delightful palate cleanser. He was such a good man, I miss him a ton. He reminded me a lot of Robert Duvall, and when I get to missing him too much I put on any old western. It's like I'm sitting in the den watching it with him. I miss my auntie too. She was 4'8" and never let anyone talk down to her. She would grab a step stool whenever she needed to discipline us kids, and she loved Aretha Franklin. She wore so much jewelry she sparkled, and when she hugged you her earrings would dig into your cheek. I don't remember what perfume she wore, but it was one specific type, and when I smell it, it's like she never left us.